Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Need I say more? Some legends I refuse to touch. There's such a wealth of information out there that has been added to or twisted over the years, repeated and repeated so much that separating fact from fiction would take more effort than I have time to dedicate. But still, the legend of the Mothman stays at the back of my mind, and occasionally pushed to the forefront when requested by different viewers. But what can I add? To be fair, I think the same thing about all of the legends I've covered here before, and still think I don't add very much. I guess that's why I tend to focus on a lot of the lesser known legends, but the big ones still get requested. And when they are requested over and over, I feel obligated to address them in some fashion or another. But recently, I received an email pertaining to the Mothman legend, and it was one that had me drop everything I was working on and give it my full attention. So, what changed my mind about wanting to cover this legend? Well, it was this one little sentence from the email. I'm probably only one of maybe 3 people alive who knows the truth. I personally know one of them who actually knew Mothman. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. Before I go all journalistic on you and quote a source familiar with the matter, perhaps we should touch on the legend first. On November 15th, 1966, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant, West Virginia were out near an abandoned World War II munitions plant, a site the locals call the TNT area, when they had an encounter with a large black creature with glowing red eyes. The creature was first spotted standing by the side of the road. Linda Scarberry, one of the witnesses, described the creature as slender but muscular, standing nearly 7 foot tall, and with large wings. She wasn't able to make out a face due to the red glow coming from the creature's eyes. Not being able to tell exactly what the thing was, the 4 of them sped away in fear, only to have the creature take flight and chase down their car. They described the winged creature as keeping pace with them, screaming an unnatural screech the whole time, chasing them all the way back to Point Pleasant before abandoning the chase at the city limits. The 4 witnesses were quick to report the event to the police, and a follow-up newspaper article was published in the Point Pleasant Register the next day. After the article was published, new sightings were reported over the next few days, and the name Mothman was quickly given to the creature, although all of the early sightings described something more bird-like than actual moth. 2 firefighters reported a giant bird with red eyes. A building contractor also spotted the creature and reported that its eyes reflected like a bicycle's reflector when he shined his flashlight at it. He went on to blame the Mothman for his missing dog, as well as strange buzzing noises from his television. The continuing newspaper articles were picked up and spread throughout the region, and eventually nationally, and people were desperate to figure out what the alleged Mothman actually was. Sheriff George Johnson believed it to be a large heron, while wildlife biologist Robert Smith said the description fit that of a sandhill crane. But of course, telling rural outdoorsmen that what they saw was actually a bird went over about as good as you can imagine. Reported sightings continued for little over a year, brief glimpses or instances where the creature would chase witnesses away from the TNT area, all the way up to December 15th, 1967. On that day, though, Point Pleasant found themselves in nationwide news again, but for a much darker reason. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge, a 2,235 feet steel suspension bridge that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed under the weight of rush hour traffic. The bridge was only 39 years old, yet 46 people lost their lives in that accident. 2 of the victims were never recovered. The official cause of the bridge's failure was reported as a 2.5 millimeter fracture in one of the eye bars. The final incident report took 3 years to complete and was instrumental in changing how bridges are now inspected and maintained. But as traumatic as this event was, the people of Point Pleasant weren't willing to let go of the Mothman stories. Many residents blamed the Mothman for the bridge's collapse, saying it was seen on the bridge earlier that day. Others said that the appearance of the Mothman on the bridge was a warning of the coming accident. They just didn't interpret it as such at the time. It's important to note here, though, that those reported sightings came to light after the bridge collapsed, not before. There are going to be some of those out there that are yelling at the screens right now. Wait, what about the verbal warnings? The strange, unexplained phone calls from the Mothman? Well, those never happened. Those accounts came from the book and later movie, The Mothman Prophecies, the original book being written in 1975 by John Keel. In that book, Keel merged 2 popular legends from the area and attempted, successfully it seems, to shoehorn them into a single related legend. The 2 legends in question are that of the Mothman from 1966 and that of Indrid Cold, a supposed extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial, depending on who you ask. Indrid Cold was a reported alien from the planet Lanulos in the Geminis galaxy, and boy, is that a rabbit trail all within itself. Keel attempts to tie the stories together because they took place in Point Pleasant around the same time frame. The Indrid Cold encounters beginning a month earlier in October of 1966. I find it a bit of a stretch, but it was popularized by the book and the later 2002 movie of the same name, and is taken as truth by many that aren't too familiar with the original stories. But hey, who am I? Maybe there are some connections that I've never come across yet. Still, if Keel's popularized take on things is to be believed, it was Indrid Cold that warned of the Silver Bridge collapse, not the Mothman itself, at least in the book and the movie. None of the original reports, though, connect Indrid Cold to the Silver Bridge. Back to the bridge collapse, though. Ever since, there has been no reported Mothman sightings, at least in Point Pleasant. But the story spread, and if it is to be believed, so did Mothman. In 1999, a sighting was reported in Moscow that foreshadowed the 1999 Russian apartment bombings. This was reported in a Georgian newspaper that I'm not even gonna try to pronounce. Georgia as in the country, not the state. There have been other sightings around the world that people claim is the Mothman, attempting to connect the sightings with disasters. But in 2016, it seems that the Mothman made its way back to Point Pleasant. That year, WCHS-TV ran a photo alleged to be that of Mothman, and I will admit the photo is pretty intriguing. A science writer, though, Sharon Hill, seems to think otherwise, stating that the picture clearly shows an owl carrying off a snake, and after reading that, I can kinda see it. So, when we really drill down into the legend, the core original Mothman seems to be a quick, brief flash in history of only a year, much different from the likes of Sasquatch, Loch Ness, and other cryptids. So, what is one to make of that? Different folklorists point out that even though there are claims of 100 reported sightings, most of those come from children's books or sensationalized accounts. There were some uncovered hoaxes, one of the most prominent being 2 construction workers taping red flashlights to a balloon and releasing it at night. Of course, that was after the original reports, and while the newspapers were still sensationalizing the stories. The original reports after the first sightings were from lust-driven teenagers who reported Mothman attacking the roof of cars parked near the TNT area, a site that had started to become popular with teens looking for a quick, secluded rendezvous point. Well now, that brings us around full circle, and back to the email I received on the subject. The author of the email has requested to remain anonymous, and probably for good reason. The legend of the Mothman has become a huge tourist cash grab for the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the contents of this email, if true, could threaten that. The name of a certain individual will also be withheld in the account's retelling, as more than likely they are no longer around to speak for themselves. This is also at the request of the email's author, and I'm more than happy to oblige. The point will be made as to why, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. For the sake of flow, we'll use the name John Doe. Here is a portion of that email. In 2002, one of the Mothman movies hit the big screen, and everyone was abuzz about it. Local news outlets and the people of Point Pleasant were all happy about the attention, and they were proud of it. No harm about that. I can understand all of it. An elderly gentleman who I've known since 1988 was paying me a visit by chance this day, and I was watching the news. The reporter on there was abuzz with the upcoming movie release, and this gentleman asked me what it was all about. I told him that it's about the monster in and around the city of Point Pleasant, and that after the bridge fell, said monster was never seen again. This man, well, he's a fellow who never watches TV, never reads the paper or anything like that, and he can't tell a lie. That's another thing about him that makes me believe what he told me about the Mothman story to this day. He's never ever told me a tall tale, if you will, so I absolutely believe what he said about the Mothman, and it goes like this. Back in those days, his father was good friends with John Doe. They had known each other probably all the way back to their school days. They worked together, helped each other farm, logged together, drank together, etc., etc. But making money in this state back then was, and still is, kinda hard sometimes, and one needs to have a side hustle, if you will, to make ends meet. John had such a side hustle, and that was moonshining. Even though there was no need for it at the time, he still did it and made pretty good money doing so. But he had a problem. The area he was shining on was some old abandoned land, I believe him saying belonging to the government, no longer in use. This wooded area was perfect for such illegal occupations, except for one little detail. The wooded area was perfect for another activity, if you will. Enraged, uncontrollable, hormonally driven teens looking for a secluded place to make out. John had a problem. These horny teens will have to go before they get wind of my steel. Best case scenario, I'll have to move it. Worst case scenario, I'll go to jail. What to do? Night after night, the kids would park in the area, do their thing, and leave. But how to get rid of them without blowing my cover? So John came up with an idea. He made a funny looking suit that my elderly gentleman friend said looked like a big bat. My friend said he actually seen the suit up close and personal once when he, a young boy at the time, and his dad paid John a visit, and he said he kept it in his barn in his loft. Now, one story is some teens, I believe this was actually the first sighting of the Mothman, seen this bat-looking creature with red eyes come out of the woods after them, and they turned tail and drove away. This creature followed the car, keeping up with it even though the car was driving 55 miles an hour. Now, did they see the creature? Well, yes. Did it have red eyes? Yes. Remember the red filter on military-type flashlights? Did it follow the car at 55 miles an hour? No. The quote creature turned off his quote red eyes, took off his suit, and returned to tend to his steel after he scared them away. Teens, like everyone else, sometimes embellish stuff because their minds can't comprehend what they saw. The teens made the paper. News spread around the area and beyond. Now, some people saw him, later referred to as the Mothman, and some people didn't, but they said they did. Some people just, in the days long before the internet, wanted their name in the paper, and if it was a big story, well, then they might even get their picture in there as well. Now this went on for some time, and you and I both know it didn't take much to scare people back then. We've seen scary movies of that era. Heck, to us, what they thought scary and terrifying you and I would and do laugh at. But to them back then, those movies were heart attack fuel. Now, in the original story, Mothman was seen atop the Silver Bridge just before the bridge collapsed. Now, was he? No, in fact he wasn't. He was more than likely at home because winter was fast approaching. It was cold and the wooded area known as his, quote, lair was already stripped of foliage. This could possibly cause people to see his steel. He had probably dismantled it and hid it from view and closed up shop until spring. He had no reason to be on the bridge, and he was probably around 40 years old at the time. Honestly, what 40-year-old man is going to dress up like that and climb a bridge? It might have been a raven, a big crow, or whatever, or an outright lie. There again, people trying to get on the news. But in the original story back then, the Mothman was never seen again, which makes sense to me. Everyone's minds were focused on the bridge collapse and the 46 people who died in it that night. Everyone living there knew someone or knew of someone who tragically lost their life. Remember, everyone's mind focused on the tragedy, and the Mothman was kind of forgotten. But here's the kicker. Mothman never made another appearance. That is, John never suited up again for a nightly scarefest. Why? He didn't have to. When the bridge collapsed, those teens would have to go the long route to make out at his lair, or should I say, steal location. So he didn't have to. His steal location was secure, and he happily made shine for a few more years until he decided to give it up. And by this time, the new bridge had already been built, but he had already retired from the business of moonshine. Now, the story resurfaces from time to time, but there again, it's just clickbait. Nothing wrong about that, nothing at all, but it's not real, but still interesting nonetheless. This elderly gentleman who shared this with me, well, I had a couple of questions to say the least. My first question, and most important, was, is John still alive? This was, of course, 2002. My friend says, I'm pretty sure he is, although I haven't seen him since 70 or 71 or so. And then he says, I bet my last dollar that bat suit is still to this day in his barn's loft. Since that story he told me, 23 years has passed, so I'm pretty sure somewhere in or around the Point Pleasant area is a grave, and buried there is John, aka the Mothman, a moonshiner who was just trying to make an extra dollar, but also created one of the state's biggest cryptids. He's probably still laughing all about it. May he rest in peace. I'm holding the name of John because, in a way, I feel he never came forward, so why should I? It's not my place to do so, in a way. Really not my business. I plan to take that name to my grave as well. So, just how you do on your channel. Is this truth, a lie, or something in the middle? That's entirely up to you. And there you have it. And there's a good bit to digest here. The movie in question was the 2002 release, The Mothman Prophecies. And even though it was not filmed in Point Pleasant, news reporters and thrill seekers descended on the small West Virginian town in droves, trying to learn everything they could, and perhaps looking for a chance of witnessing the creature for themselves. After that, the legend took on a life of its own. And that same year of the movie's release, Point Pleasant held its first ever Mothman Festival, one that takes place annually ever since, on the third weekend of September. There's also the famed Mothman statue, the Mothman Museum, and more souvenirs than you can shake a stick at, all spurred from the release of that 2002 movie. The festival has taken place and grown every year since 2002, with the exception of the plague of 2020, and it shows no sign of slowing down anytime soon. The legend itself has become the identity of the entire town, so it's easy to see why the author of the email I received would be apprehensive about their identity getting out, to say the least. I will admit, I wasn't sure how I would feel going into this. A lot of times, finding out something was all a hoax tends to take the magic out of the air, and leaves me feeling hollow inside. Yeah, I totally fell for the Bigfoot in the freezer hoax a decade or so ago. But this one, it hit a little differently. After reading through that email, I couldn't help but smile. Sure, the people of Point Pleasant are proud of the Mothman, the legend that put them on the map. But which is better? Being proud of an unknown creature that just happened to spend about a year in your area, or being proud of that one citizen that created a worldwide sensation that lives on even today? The reason I smile at this account is the whole reason I focus solely on Southern stories and folklore here. This is where I was born, and I've spent my entire life here. I know the type of characters and mindset behind all of these different legends. Is the account I was sent true? Who's to say? I do see it as a high probability, though. I've been to many secluded locations with different legends attached to them. Sometimes I've encountered things that just can't be explained, and a few times I've witnessed things that made my blood run cold and still haunts me when my mind tends to wander. But you know what? I've revisited those sites from time to time. But there are a select few where I never encountered anything paranormal or supernatural. But I have encountered people. Sometimes just a man. No ghost, no unexplained creatures. Just a man, living out remotely, doing Lord knows what, and is adamant about being left alone. Long story short, I've never returned to those places. Sometimes people are more scary than the darkest legends we can dig up. That reminds me of a quote from the book Median Unmade. When a monster is a monster, he is being true to his nature. When a human is a monster, it's far worse. All in all, it's up to you which case you want to believe. But when you step back and give it a high overview, the Mothman did exist and was there in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in some fashion or another. In which incarnation it was is entirely up to you. There's no doubt that this presentation will not do any damage to the life and legend of the Mothman, and by no means is that my intent. The Mothman Festival still sits high atop my bucket list of things to visit one day. And there's also no doubt that a flash of red eyes or the heavy flap of wings in the night sky would cause me to stop and take pause of my situation. But as far as the account that was sent to me, I can see that happening. I've met those kinds of people before. Someone that will do what needs to be done and simply move on with their lives like nothing ever happened. If that's the case here, then good on you, unnamed moonshiner. You really got us good. And taking the story to the grave with you, well done, sir. Well done.